Hello, UCLA Radio. This is Dr. No, and we are about to start our interview with PJ O'Rourke, who is one of my favorite writers and also one of the funniest.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. O'Rourke. Hello, I'm calling about the interview.
Yep,
Okay.
here I am.
Sweet. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. What's it called?
Not at all.
So, you have a new book called The Baby Boom. Our listeners will probably have a slight idea what it's about, going by the title. But do you want to delve deeper into that topic?
Well, I think the subtitle says a lot. The
Oh,
Baby
okay.
Boom, how it got that way, and it wasn't my fault, and I'll never do it again. This is a member of the Baby Boom senior class, born 1947, trying to do two things. One, explain to kids today how it was that their world got created, because you live in a very different world than the one the Baby Boom grew up in. And also, speaking to my own generation, just having some fun evoking memories and making us think back and realize why we did what we did, and whether we should be proud or ashamed or both by turns or both at the same time.
I see. So, what inspired you to write about the baby boomers?
Well, it's, age, really, I suppose. 2014 happens to be the year that the very last of the baby boomers, the youngest of the baby boomers, turned 50. And, people over 50 rule the world. I didn't think so maybe when I was 25, but I've realized that as I've gotten older, that basically people over 50 hold most of the reins of political power. They hold most of the reins of business power. They probably have a little less impact in the entertainment industry, but even then, they ultimately sign the check and make the decisions as to what artist gets promoted and what movie gets filmed. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. And
so I thought, that this is kind of useful for us at age 50 plus to look back on all this and sort of see how it got that way, and useful, I hope, for people who are younger than we are to sort of understand how things got this way and how different things really are.
okay, yeah. What's it called? Well, from what I've read, it's very called insight. It's very
You're gonna have to
insightful.
speak up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. So, from what I've read, it's very insightful. It's funny too, of course. So yes, and
Well, I tried. Yeah. It's not a generation that ever took itself too seriously, or when we did take ourselves very seriously, the results were very silly. But we're the generation of the National Lampoon, of Saturday Night Live, of Animal House, and indeed of Jon Stewart, who is at like the tag end of the baby boom.
oh yeah.
Bill Maher.
Yeah.
All that. I mean, the making mock of things approach to political analysis is basically our invention.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much for that.
Well, I think I think it sort of works. It deserves being made mock of, and the sort of people who are at the top of the food chain in business and politics, we should be skeptical about them. We shouldn't regard them as heroes or people whose orders should be followed without question, or as wise men and women. We ought to take the mickey out of them.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And although not an autobiography, the baby boom does draw from your own life and experiences. Were you pensive at all about?
Again, I can't. You have to get close to that phone.
Sorry. Although not an autobiography, the baby boom does draw from your own life and experiences. Were you pensive at all about opening up or to readers?
No, not really, because it isn't a memoir, because a memoir is all about how the person who's writing is different from the reader. Mom chased them around with scissors or whatever it was, and they were molested by all number of space aliens, and they can talk to plants.
Mm.
What I was trying to do really was use my own memories to put people back in touch with their own memories, to sort of act as a kind of a seed or a little bit of yeast in the bread dough of other people's minds. And so what I concentrate on in the part of this book that's remembered is all the things that we had in common. And, I think I'm a reasonably good person for that, not because of any merit, but because I come from the middle of the country. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, back when industrial cities were still industrial cities. Toledo's about maybe 100 miles from where the center of population in the United States was at that time. My family had spot on median income. I mean, I looked it up, and what my dad earned was right there in the middle. Half of the people in the United States earned more, half less. Grew up in like a perfectly normal, old-fashioned kind of city suburb, not way out in the burbs like the suburbs are today, but neighborhood with houses and yards, houses pretty close together, yards not too huge, with a ton of other kids, of course, because it was the baby boom. So there were a mess of us all there.
Oh, okay.
So I figured, why not use this? Why not use the fact that I'm a very ordinary example of a baby boomer?
I see. Yeah. And naturally, you contrast your generation with your parents, who made up the greatest generation in your book. What differences between the two stood out most to you, and were there any similarities?
Well, the odd thing here is that there's one number that you can really put your finger on that really tells a lot about why the baby boom's like the baby boom and the greatest generation's like the greatest generation, and that is that median family income. It was a little hard to figure out because the Census Bureau's only been keeping records of median family income since '49, but you can use other figures to figure. And what it comes down to is that the greatest generation grew up with a median family income that was $10,000 less per year than the median family income for baby boomers. That's $10,000 adjusted for inflation. $10,000 real dollars. And not only that, but the economic circumstances in which they grew up, from like the end of World War I, until the end of, through the Depression, was their incomes went up, then they went down, then they went way up, then they went way down, so much so that for the greatest generation as children, their parents' best year and their worst year were only 2 years apart, 29 to 2.5 years, 29 to the bottom of the Depression in 31, 32. So not only did they have less money than we did, but they had much less economic stability. And then the third factor is, if you look at economic growth during the time that the baby boom is growing up, which is from the end of World War II, basically till the Arab oil embargo, the American GDP per capita is just on a straight, steady rise. It's not spectacular, but it's a straight, steady rise. Everything is getting better. And obviously that changed our view of the world. Our parents were much more fearful that everything could go out from under them with a depression or a war or whatever than we were.
I see. Yeah. So, in addition to that median income, what other developments, political, social, technological, or otherwise, do you feel molded the boomers into the people they are today?
Well, oddly enough, I don't think the technological changes were as important as some people make them out to be. I mean, the changes that we've undergone since the late '80s have really been much more radical than the changes that the baby boom saw. I mean, a 1950s automobile is just like a better version of a 1930s automobile. The brakes are a little better, the engine's a little more powerful. The styling's different, but that doesn't really matter. Television is just radio with pictures. It's not a radical change. And the telephone is the same as it was when our parents were. So we didn't really
Mm. Oh, I see. I see. Well, how do you think the following generations, like Generation X and the Millennials, measure up to the baby boomers?
Oh, I think they're great. I think they. I don't see anything wrong with them at all. It seems to me like they looked at the baby boom, which in many cases, of course, their parents, and they kind of learned from our mistakes. Kind of took the, kind of more cautious about like things like promiscuous drug use and promiscuities of all other kinds, and and political extremism and so on. They kind of deducted that from the picture, and then but they definitely accepted the baby boom's more inclusive, easier going, kind of kinder nature. Give everybody a drug and a hug.
Mm. I see. Well,
So I think I actually think a lot of the generations that follow the baby boom, I think they're an improvement on the baby boom. Of course, one thing you guys have got to face is that you're going to be paying. Excuse me, I got a little chest cold here.
oh, it's okay.
I've been on the road for a couple of weeks, and you
Oh, yeah.
can't do all that flying without getting something.
Oh, I see.
You're going to be paying through the nose for all those big social programs, Medicare and Social Security and stuff. Is going to be, by the time you're your peak earning years, the government's going to be taking all your money unless some changes are made.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess that'll be our cost to carry then.
Yeah, and it's going to leave you not fond of us.
Oh.
I mean, I don't think that the generations that come after the baby boom are going to look at the baby boom with much admiration, essentially because of what we're doing to their wallet. And the only thing I can really say to excuse myself on this is that two of the biggest programs here, Social Security and Medicare, are not baby boom inventions by any means. I mean, one was FDR generation prior to the Greatest Generation. And the other one was the Greatest Generation, LBJ in office. And both these programs were crafted without didn't seem to pay any attention to demographics or any attention to the fact that Americans were living longer, that medical expenses were going to be rising, et cetera, et cetera. They just passed this stuff because it made them feel good. It's like just give money to old people and then expect the old people to die promptly at 67 and a half.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about because those developments, what's it called, like the not the New Deal, sorry, the Great Society, they're associated with baby boomers even though they were they were barely not even barely 20 years old at the time it came through. So yeah. So what are some other misconceptions that you feel people have about baby boomers?
Well, one thing, and the baby boom, of course, is partly to blame for this, is that we tend to get and take credit for all sorts of things we don't deserve, like the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was people older than us, and it was that generation in between the baby boom and the Greatest Generation. The kids that went down to register voters and do sit-ins and stuff, they belonged to the so-called silent generation. They weren't being silent there. Martin Luther King belonged to our parents' generation. And in fact, our parents, although they were prone to a kind of casual racism in their speech, even in their attitudes, it was they who desegregated the schools. It was they who desegregated the army. They may not have been as willing as we would have liked them to be, as enthusiastic about this, but they did it. And feminist movement is the same thing. I mean, Gloria Steinem was born in the 1930s, also from Toledo, incidentally. I know Gloria a little bit. And even though I'm very politically conservative and she's very otherwise, well, we always end up talking, whenever I see her, we end up talking about Toledo. Not about our political differences. But anyway, the second wave feminists, as they're called, were, again, at least half a generation older than the baby boomers. And the political activists, guys like Abby Hoffman, again, were born. Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and all those guys, again, they were born in the 30s. Timothy Leary was born in 1922. The Beats,
I see. I see. Also, you mentioned that some that members of your generation have memorialized their stories in movies, songs, TV shows, memoirs, and blogs, but not so much in poetry or novels, which you attribute to the fact that literature is the enemy of fun. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because it's too hard.
Oh, I see.
Basically, I mean, the baby boom. I've got a lot of good things to say about the baby boom, but on the other hand, you won't catch me saying that we're not a self-indulgent
Mm.
generation. We are a self-indulgent generation, and we like instant results, and we like to, if you take a picture of something or perform something, there it is. I mean, Saturday Night Live is a perfect example. I mean, we like, immediate gratification. And you don't get a lot of immediate gratification out of writing novels.
I see. I see.
Although there are some incredible novelists from the baby boom. Richard Price, I don't know if you've ever read any of his stuff.
I'm afraid I haven't.
Clockers, just brilliant.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll check it out then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I recommend it.
Okay, thank you. And also, the book spends some time describing car culture, something that you tackled in another of your books, Driving Like Crazy. How do you take such a seemingly technical subject like cars and make it interesting for readers who are possibly only peripherally familiar with it?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I did, but I tried. And the reason for that is I come back to the self-indulgence angle.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
It's okay. It's okay. Bless you.
That's a business I grew up in. As a matter of fact, there have been more generations of O'Rourke's in the car business than there have been generations of Fords.
Oh, wow.
My grandfather, although we haven't done quite so well by it, but my grandfather was a buggy mechanic. He was born in 1877.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a buggy mechanic in Toledo. And he saw a horseless buggy go by.
Mm-hmm.
And Granddad got the idea right away. He became a car mechanic. And then he realized, that he could keep his hands cleaner and make more money by selling them than by fixing them. And so he was a salesman for Willys, the company that would eventually turn into what's now the Jeep.
Mm.
And he did that for a long time, and then he had his own dealerships and did quite well with it. My father grew up in the business. All my uncles, I've got some second cousins and stuff that are, I don't know what, they fifth or sixth generation in the car business. And so, and I spent a lot of time writing about it for Car Driver and Automobile Magazine. So it's just so I'm indulging myself a little bit.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, in fact, one of your earliest essays, and that it was reprinted in Driving Like Crazy, called "How to Drive Fast on Drugs Will Get You Your Wing Wing, Squeeze and Not Spill Your Drink." So, how'd you end up writing that?
One of the proud moments of literature from me. It's all in the research, really, to tell you the truth.
I see. Yeah, and you revisited it in Driving Like Crazy. You wrote like a response piece to it. Now that you've grown up.
I wrote the middle-aged response to this young twerp, raving about and fibbing more than a little, as I point out in there.
I see.
I should have had the opportunity to be so wild.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Was it what was it like for you when you were revisiting it? Was it just kind of you kind of embarrassed, or were you just kind of you were just laughing it off?
I wasn't embarrassed. It was something that was written for the National Lampoon.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah.
was written very much in the spirit of the. I mean, there was a lot of stuff like that in the National Lampoon.
Oh yeah. Well, can you?
I thought it was like an architect might say it was appropriate to the site.
I see. Yeah, that's what's called. You weren't just a writer for National Lampoon, but you were also a managing editor for it during its heyday in the 70s. Can you tell us about that?
I actually, I was managing editor because I had some experience with small newspapers and magazines and stuff, so I knew a little bit about the business end. And then I eventually, in 77, I took over as editor-in-chief. And it was basically between Saturday Night Live and Animal Houses, and just as all the talent was getting sucked out of the room.
Oh, I see.
I was kind of left behind.
Yeah, what's it called? Did you happen to bump into anybody at National Lampoon at the time, like John Belushi or Chevy Chase?
Sure.
Oh,
yeah.
sweet.
I knew John. and he got like famous really fast. John was always like that.
Oh, I see.
John was like that when nobody knew who he was. When he was just some obscure guy from Second City in Chicago. He was not. He was not going to make old bones. There was no doubt about that. Probably the closest friend I had at the Lampoon, unfortunately, just died a couple years ago, was John Hughes.
Oh yeah.
He was really a genius.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it called? Wait. John Belushi was a baby boomer, and was John Hughes too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was born 49, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so, and after leaving National Lampoon, you wrote for Playboy, Vanity Fair, and Car and Driver before becoming Foreign Affairs desk chair for Rolling Stone.
I was just trying to make a freelance, make a living as a freelancer, and then Rolling Stone offered me a steady gig as a foreign correspondent, which is what I wanted to do. I was trying to get somebody to pay me to go overseas, and I was quite surprised when it was Rolling Stone that came through, because in the first place they had really never done much overseas coverage of politics and so on, and so I was surprised on that level. The other thing I was surprised is that even back then my politics didn't really fit with their politics. But they didn't seem to care, and it was a great relationship. It was like, gosh, this lasted about 15 years.
Oh, I see. You worked there at the same time as one of my other heroes, Hunter S. Thompson, and covered the president.
I knew Hunter quite well.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I actually met Hunter before. It wasn't through Rolling Stone that we knew each other. I used to go out to ski in Aspen back in the 70s before it became Glitter Gulch. Before it was like full of insanely rich people. When an ordinary person could still go there.
Oh, I see.
And I got to know Hunter out there, and God, he was a nice guy.
Oh, really?
He was one of those people who felt compelled in public to put on the sort of Hunter act.
Oh.
But in private, he just couldn't have been more of a gentleman. And he was also exceedingly well read. There was almost nothing Hunter hadn't read.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was, spending time with him was a real pleasure, and he was a real loss.
Yeah. And what's it called? What was talking about politics with him like? Because you guys were kind of like at the opposite of the ends of the spectrum, aren't you?
Yeah, but Hunter's politics were so all over the map.
Oh.
I never really paid too much attention to it.
I see.
I don't know what you would call it. He had this kind of anarcho. He was like a very, very sort of 60s point of view on politics. It was one of those things that you really couldn't argue with.
I see.
In order to argue with somebody, they have to be making some kind of sense. But on the other hand, he had a great, sort of fuck 'em all attitude.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So nothing wrong with that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, well, another of your books from around that time, All the Trouble in the World, finds you traveling to various countries to gain insight into topics that Americans were alarmed about. In one chapter, you argue that liberals use environmentalism as a way to be covertly racist. Why is that?
I'm sorry, you have to repeat that last one. I didn't get the very last
Oh,
word
sorry.
there.
In one chapter, you argue that liberals use environmentalism as a way to be covertly racist. Why do you think that is?
To be covertly what?
Racist.
Oh, yeah. Well, there is something of going around the world telling other people they can't have Buicks, especially other people that don't happen to look like you, that I fundamentally object to. I think I probably have a more accepting view on the environmental argument now than I did at the time that I read that. After all, we know considerably more. That book was written.
I see. Yeah, what's it?
Yeah, it was before my daughter was born. She was 16,
wow.
So.
Oh, I see.
Even so, even if I'm more inclined to agree with environmentalists than I was then, there is something about going to 1 billion people in China, going to 1 billion people in India and saying, no, no barbecues for you. No backyard barbecues for you. You have to use this solar cooker we invented. It'll warm the things right up to room temperature.
Yeah.
We would appreciate it, if you didn't buy jeans and t-shirts and stuff and kept going around in loincloths and sandals made out of car tires.
Yeah.
There is something patronizing about that. I think the thing that bothers me most, though, about most do-good sort of causes, especially not so much the people who are actually doing good in the field and can be remarkably courageous. After all, they're putting their butt on the line for it. But the people who advocate these things back home is sort of how much of this is to make them feel better, and also how much of this is like just a way to get greater political power. You know, if we have more regulations, be it about whatsoever, there's kind of more latitude for politics. And politics is this silly field where there's like no bar to entry. You know, you don't have to be smart. You don't have to be informed. Certainly don't have to be morally upstanding. So I don't. My opposition to politics is more like a lot of conservatives have a sort of qualitative objection to politics. Mine is more quantitative. It's just the size of the damn thing.
Yeah, and what's it called? And it's just what's it called? It's funny because what's it called? Like you specifically talked about like overpopulation and like how it only seems to be a problem when it's brown people who are doing the overpopulation. It's never like, oh, there are too many.
Yeah. You may have noticed brown or yellow or whatever. You know, I mean, you know, a whole bunch of us. That's Manhattan.
Yeah.
That's Brooklyn. That's like fun. That's urban density, right? That's the more efficient way to live. Make a smaller carbon footprint if you ride your bicycle around Brooklyn, you know, and live in a 300 square foot apartment. But I mean, the problem isn't too many people. The problem is too many poor people. And and I don't mean to cut down on the number of people. I mean to decrease the poverty. You know.
Yeah, and
amazing. I mean, it's like what's like 1.29 billion people live on less than $1.25 a day.
Oh my goodness.
It's like a frightening statistic.
Yeah, it is. And what's it called? Oh, well, if we could revisit your criticisms of government, you wrote one of your most successful books back in the 80s, Parliament of Horrors, which satirized the U.S. government. Do you feel that criticisms and observations are still relevant?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously the players have changed over the course of 20-some years, and the numbers have gotten bigger. You can almost take every number in that book and move the decimal place over one or two. You know? But the fundamental, what I was fundamentally trying to get at was how politics work, and obviously we need politics for certain things. Anybody who thinks they're an anarchist, you know, I invite them to visit Mogadishu for a few weeks. But you know, obviously we need a political structure, we need government, so on. But you know, the internal workings of politics are not very pretty.
I see.
And that hasn't changed a bit. In fact, if anything, it's probably gotten a little worse since then.
Yeah.
I was writing that book when George H.W. Bush was president.
Yeah. And it was so weird because like a lot of the things you pointed out, I saw direct parallels between today, like with that what was it, the saving and loans bailout? I thought of the Wall Street bailout. I was like, whoa.
Totally the same thing. You know, everybody's forgotten about that savings and loan. You know, if you bring that up, like people just stare at you blankly, even people who were there. But yes, exactly the same problem of the taxpayers being brought in, you know, to save the bacon of all these like rich nitwits. You know?
Yeah, it's just, and of course the war on drugs is still going on, as you were reporting at the time.
It is, yeah, and as it was a quarter of a century ago, we're still losing.
Yeah, it's just the more things change, the more they remain the same.
Unfortunately, when it comes to politics, of course, if you read back through the politics of you know, like 19th century Britain when they were at the peak of their world dominance and so on, it isn't much different.
I see. Yeah. And I want to bring up another of your books. In Peace Kills, you discuss American foreign policy under the Clinton and Bush administrations. Do you feel that Obama has radically departed from the policies of his predecessor?
Actually, the surprising thing to me,
oh, really?
I expected him to do so. In fact, I dreaded it a little bit because I was afraid, like you, bad as our foreign policy has been, I was afraid he'd come up with something worse.
Oh, I see.
But actually, it's remarkable how he has basically pursued the same sort of arc as George W. Bush, you know, he claimed to detest so much. I mean, yes, he got us out of Iraq, but, you know, basically the Iraqis threw us out. You know? And yes, he's going to get us out of Afghanistan, but basically the Afghanis are throwing us
Mm-hmm.
And, his use of drones and his, obviously, the stuff, the NSA stuff, is absolutely consistent. I mean, there he is, somebody who'd been a fairly loud voice in the Senate, in opposition to this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
defending it now.
Oh, yeah. What's it called? Yeah, and it seems like a lot of Democrats defend it now, too. Like Lincoln Firelands.
They do, yeah. I mean, Dianne Feinstein, to take an example, who's politically quite liberal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's it called?
Actually, I had a talk the other night. I was down in Washington with a Republican congressman who's on the Intelligence Committee, and he said a lot of the stuff, a lot of the classified stuff we see, he said you change your mind if you can see what we see, but we can't talk about it.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if he's right or wrong, but but the way that Dianne Feinstein, of all people, has defended this stuff makes me think that this guy probably wasn't way off.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah, so what's it called? Is it crazy or just predictable, like that people would change their opinions based on the political party in power? I don't know.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I said it's crazy or predictable that people would change their policy preferences based on whoever's in power.
Oh, no, I think it's absolutely predictable.
Yeah.
It's not only whoever's in power, it's getting into power themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once they control the levers of power, they become far less acute critics of the people in charge, Once they become the people in charge. And see, that's always the point I've been trying to make, is not the people. I mean, some of them are good, some of them are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are in between. It's the process that is the problem. And everybody, no matter who they are, ends up getting caught up in that process.
I see.
They may come in, Simon Pure, either as lefties or righties or whatever. They might be Dennis Kucinich or they might be Tea Party members, but by the time they're done with it, they're like part of the machinery.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Which is probably good in certain ways because, after all, we don't want those kind of like radical shifts in government that a lot of countries have.
That's
so
a concern.
We want some continuity, but it does show that the process is more powerful than the ideas or the ideals, or the process is more powerful than the principles, and that is a little worrying.
I see. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to start wrapping up the interview, but I have two more questions. Okay, sweet. And this one is, what do you feel are the most pressing political issues today?
Not the social ones.
Okay.
Because I think those are going to solve themselves. I mean, we've seen this just tidal shift in people's attitude toward gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
This is just changed remarkably over just the past year.
Yeah, it did. It really did.
I think people will sort out. I mean, social issues to me are something that's best left to individuals anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see them as really pressing social issues. Probably the most pressing issue is the fact that we're just spending a ton more money than we're bringing in. I mean, we're spending between federal, state, and local governments, we're spending 40% of the GDP. First place, I think that number itself, that percentage of GDP, is just too high. I don't want 40% of all of our goods and services controlled by the political process. And the other thing is, it doesn't match up with what we're bringing in. We're bringing in as government income maybe 30% or something. I've checked the figures lately, but certainly the two don't match up, and that can't be good. I mean, down that road lies Argentina.
I see. Yeah. And, you are coming to Los Angeles next weekend on a book tour for the Baby Boom. Would you like to tell our listeners about your upcoming appearances?
Yeah, if I can remember what they are. I'm going to be on the Bill Maher show, I know that.
Oh, really? Oh, sweet.
Yeah, which is fun. I've known Bill for a long time. And, I honestly don't remember off the top of my head what else I'm doing. Somebody, the book publishers He'll do that.
Okay. Well, what's it called? Some of the information she forwarded to me said that you would be speaking at the Ronald Reagan Library on the 8th of February, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you for reminding me.
yeah, sorry. What's up? And then the other one, I'm afraid I don't remember the location for that, but it's not too far from UCLA actually. So yeah, I'll
Yes.
mhm.
Yeah, he isn't.
Yeah, what's it called? So I'll post the information out for my listeners
Well,
and say
thanks.
yeah.
I appreciate
Oh,
it.
you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome, Mr. O'Rourke. Just thanks for coming on for my show. It was an honor to interview you. It was an honor to interview you. I've like read 4 of your books, and you're just like incredibly funny. It's just great to interview you.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Okay, so all right. This was P.J. O'Rourke. He is the author of Parliament of Horrors, All the Trouble in the World, and Driving Like Crazy, and he just wrote The Baby Boom, which he's on a book tour for right now, and he is going to be promoting it in Los Angeles this February. So please check him out. Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke, and have a great day.
You're welcome. And you have a great day, too.
Oh, thank you very much. Bye bye.